Hi everyone! Okay, so once again, it's been a while since I addressed something stupid, so let's see what we can find.
If you talk about physics with an atheist, though, well, that's something more fundamental than just little pieces of evidence, isn't it? So here's an approach I like to take with this. The Bible says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
You see where you went wrong, right?
So applying that to cosmology specifically, which is our topic this evening, the rest of our presentation, I will be arguing that an atheistic approach to cosmology, when done consistently, which no atheist actually does.
Yeah, we atheists appeal to gods all the time. No, wait.
But if the atheists were to be consistent, they would wind up requiring, or at least acknowledging, that their model requires violation of some fundamental physics, ultimately a denial that laws of physics are even valid things anyway. And if they really want to be consistent and go all the way with their worldview, they ultimately have to deny that the universe even exists.
Wow.
First of all, let me say that the biblical worldview actually affirms physics. So a Christian physicist can affirm that laws of physics are real things and that the universe operates according to some.
And he'd be wrong, because laws of physics are not real things. They are our descriptions of how nature consistently behaves, or at least appears to consistently behave.
And then we can go try to figure them out. Atheists, however, don't have that foundation, of course, since they don't believe in the Bible, so they have to try to come up with a different justification for believing in the laws of physics.
Right. We observe that nature seems to behave in a consistent manner, and we describe that behavior in terms of descriptive laws.
Well, let's see how that works out. First of all, let's say that the universe exists. Now, later I'll show that atheism says it doesn't anyway, but for now let's all agree that it does, and ask a question. Did this universe have a beginning?
That's not relevant to whether we can describe its behavior. But I will say this, it's an empirical fact that the observable universe is expanding, and because looking out into space means looking back in time, we can say that we know it has been expanding for as long as it has been around.
Well, there's two possible answers to that, yes and no, right? Let's look at the answer no first. If the universe did not have a beginning, that would mean it is eternal, right? Because that's what no beginning means. If it never began, it's always been there, thus it's eternal, and thus it's existed forever.
Well, actually, even if the past is finite, if the universe came into being along with time, then the universe has actually always existed. Because always means for as long as there has been time. There would exist no point in time at which the universe did not exist.
A universe that existed forever would violate the second law of thermodynamics, at least the one that we see would. What do I mean by that? Well, is there anything in the universe that hasn't cooled off yet? Stars, right?
Well, at least you didn't take that stupid "we couldn't be in the present if the past were infinite" approach. Credit where credit is due, I guess. But the second law of thermodynamics is all about statistics. It doesn't say that the entropy of an isolated system can't decrease, it says that it doesn't. Why? Simple. Because when a system undergoes any form of change, it's so much more probable that this change leads to a state of higher entropy, one with a more even energy distribution. Because those states are much more common. Much more. As an analogy, consider how much more probable it is that the letters in the collected works of Shakespeare in random order produce pure gibberish instead of something that makes sense. There are simply more ways of writing gibberish than actual words and sentences. But randomize the letters enough times and eventually words and even sentences are expected to show up by pure chance. This is analogous to thermal and quantum fluctuations producing something we'd recognize as, well, something other than random noise. It could even be a complex structure, potentially even a new universe. Given enough time, and this is a truly insane amount of time, we'd actually expect all of Shakespeare's letters to end up back in their original places by dumb luck alone. It's easy to say that this is just plain silly, that a million monkeys with a million typewriters couldn't do it in a million years, and yeah, that's absolutely correct. But we're not talking about 1,000,000 years. We're talking about a time period that can't even be written out except in scientific notation, but it's still finite. The time after which one would expect a system to return to its initial state is called the Poincaré recurrence time of the system in question. And guess what? This can be calculated for our observable universe. As you'd expect, the number is absolutely insane. 10 to the 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 1.1 years. But that's still a finite time period, so it's nothing compared to eternity. On infinite timescales, the universe randomly resetting itself might as well be an everyday occurrence. Infinity's funny like that in statistics. If time is eternal in both directions, then this has happened an infinite number of times in the past and will happen an infinite number of times in the future.
So let's say the universe began. Okay. What existed, though, before the universe began?
If the past is infinite, then probably a universe much like our own. But to be perfectly honest, I don't know, and neither does anyone else. If the past is finite, then nothing. And I don't mean a state called nothing. I mean nothing. Null. Does not compute. Undefined. Error. There's no such thing as before the beginning of time.
Well, again, you have two choices. There was something, or there was nothing. If there was something before the universe began, then you really haven't answered the question then, have you? Where did the something come from? Did it have a beginning, and was there something before it?
If the past is infinite, then yes, there was something before that, and before that, and before that. An infinite regression. And that's not a problem. It's just counterintuitive.
Sometimes people say, yes, there was something before the universe. They'll try to invoke a multiverse with infinite universes, or maybe brain universes, where brain stands for membrane. Our universe is just one of an infinite number of these brains that are all colliding in space, and each collision represents a new bang, blah, blah, blah. You see, though, this isn't actually answering the question, was there something before our universe? Has it always been there? This is saying that there was something, but again, did this something have a beginning? Ultimately, if you keep saying no, you're endorsing an eternal universe, which doesn't work, as we just saw.
But it does work because your objection doesn't hold up.
Therefore, an atheist ultimately has to say that at one point or another, there was nothing.
No, again, saying that is nonsensical.
That the universe had to come from nothing. Well, sometimes when atheists say this, you get to ask a few questions. What do they mean by nothing? Was it really actually nothing?
I say yes. If the past is finite, then nothing really does mean nothing. As in, there's no state there at all. There is no point in time before the beginning of time, just as there is no point on the surface of Earth which is north of the North Pole.
Either it was or it wasn't. Some atheists will say the universe came from nothing, but then you press them on the point and they'll say, well, it was really a quantum field. That's where the universe came from. Well, a quantum field isn't actually nothing, is it?
Well, sure, in physics, nothing usually refers to the quantum vacuum because that's the closest thing to nothing that can exist in physical reality. And that includes time, space, and energy fluctuations. So it's not what we usually mean by nothing, but then again, neither is nothingness itself, because if I can call it something, obviously there's something there for me to slap a label on, right? Nothing is a tricky subject, both in science and philosophy.
Now, lately, the new excuse is quantum gravity is what the universe came from. Stephen Hawking has even said the laws of gravity and quantum theory allow universes to appear spontaneously from nothing. Even Dr. Krauss itself, the person who wrote this best-selling book and says that a quantum theory of gravity explains the whole shebang, the ultimate mystery of our origins, admitted in an interview, I also don't have a quantum theory of gravity.
It's true that we don't know how quantum gravity works, but quantum mechanics and gravity are both pretty well understood, so it's safe to say that certain things must come out of a working theory that combines them both. We know that quantum fluctuations can produce energy out of, well, nothing, pardon the expression, provided that it only exists for a very brief amount of time. While this violates the classical notion of energy conservation, in quantum mechanics, nature can, figuratively speaking, get away with anything as long as it returns to normal before anything has a chance to notice. While this sounds crazy, and I agree that it does, it is a vital part of how quantum mechanics works. It's what allows virtual particles to pop in and out of existence, and they are the medium that allows forces to propagate. Now, in nothing, there is no energy and no time. The problem is that these are complementary quantities. The more accurately one is determined, the less accurately is the other. So if we, as a thought experiment, take away literally everything, we still can't say that we have no energy and no time. There's just no getting rid of them both. According to general relativity, the modern theory of gravity, energy and space-time are inseparable in the sense that if you have one, you have the other. Because of quantum mechanics and gravity, and thus quantum gravity, it's impossible to not have a universe. As Lawrence Krauss puts it, nothing is unstable. It spontaneously decays into a quantum vacuum. A state of nothingness simply cannot physically exist.
So we see then that idea of coming from nothing that's not really nothing doesn't work, so therefore it had to come from actual nothing. But what would that imply? Well, that would imply that the universe ultimately had to create itself.
No one says that the universe caused itself to begin to exist. To say that something doesn't have a cause, or to say that we don't know what could have caused it, or to say that we don't even know if it makes sense to talk about a cause for the universe, does not in any way imply that it caused itself.
Now, sometimes if you talk about this to an atheist, he'll say, well, no. You're trying to tell me God did it. Well, God didn't have a cause. So I can just say the universe didn't have a cause. And that's no worse than what you're saying. Right, Mr. Christian? Well, no, it's not the same thing at all, because I'm saying God exists outside of space and time. He's transcendent to the universe. Therefore, it's not a problem for him to have created the universe.
Well, that solves nothing. If God created time, then when did he create time? Before time began? Well, there's no such thing as before time began, so that's out. What about when it began? Well, then it was beginning anyway, so it's kind of redundant. How about after it began? Well, that's even more redundant. It seems like if the past is finite, then time started all on its own, even if there is a God. But another interesting thing here that you might want to think about is that if God is outside space and time, then doesn't that mean he is nowhere and never? Congratulations, you're an atheist.
Also, the idea violates physics anyway. Let's talk about that for a minute. If you ever take a physics class, probably one of the first things you'll be taught is an idea called the conservation of matter and energy.
Energy, yeah, but go on.
If you're an atheist cosmologist who believes that the universe came out of nothing, that violates this principle on the largest possible scale, right?
No, because
it may seem that nothing making everything is a problem, but that's not really a problem if everything is really nothing.
Well, why'd you bring it up then?
Stephen Hawking explained this. He said, the laws of physics demand the existence of something called negative energy. To get your head around this weird but crucial concept, let me draw a simple analogy. Imagine a man wants to build a hill on a flat piece of land. The hill will represent the universe. To make this hill, he digs a hole in the ground and uses that soil to build his hill. But of course, he's not just making a hill, he's also making a hole. In effect, a negative version of the hill. The stuff that was in the hole has now become the hill, and so it all perfectly balances out. This is the principle behind what happened right at the beginning of the universe. When the Big Bang produced a vast amount of positive energy, it simultaneously produced the same amount of negative energy. In this way, the positive and negative add up to zero, always. It's another law of nature. By the way, before I continue reading, I'll say they don't actually add up to zero unless you invoke dark energy and a lot of other stuff that nobody's ever seen.
But the effects of them can be seen, and they contribute to the overall mass of the universe. And this can be measured by looking at its curvature. You do this by making observations of the cosmic microwave background. It has been done, and at large scales the universe is geometrically flat, which corresponds to a universe with a total energy of zero.
So what does that mean? It means that if the universe adds up to nothing, then you don't need a God to create it. You see his motive here, don't you?
Yes. He wanted to provide a scientifically valid explanation for the origin of the universe. In other words, one that doesn't appeal to the casting of a create universe spell by an invisible wizard.
The universe is the ultimate free lunch. So you understand what he's saying. He's saying, okay, there's flat ground, a man digs a hole, well, he makes a hole and a hill. It's kind of the same. Positive hill, negative hole.
Brace for stupid.
Cancels each other out. Universe works the same way. Who can see the problem in his analogy? Did the hole dig itself?
Yeah, because I'm sure that's the analogy. It's not that x plus minus x equals 0, but that someone had to dig the hole. So someone had to get the ball rolling. Someone had to separate the positive and the negative. You cannot honestly be this stupid, can you? This is just dishonest.
I once worked on a circuit, which is a very common design in loudspeaker systems, by the way, where one part of the circuit had to produce power to another part of the circuit, and it did so in the form of two wires, one of which had plus 40 volts on it and one of which had minus 40 volts on it. And if minus volts sound weird, don't worry, you can do that. So the whole purpose of the circuit was to make plus 40 volts, minus 40 volts on these two wires. Now I could have argued, had I been thinking about this issue then, that on a net basis my circuit produced 0 volts. It didn't actually do anything, right? Same logic as what Professor Hawking used, right? Yet somehow, when I pulled the plug out of the wall, the thing stopped working.
And that analogy falls apart the second you realize that the labeling doesn't refer to the inherent voltage of a component, but rather where in the circuit you are. At what potential relative to ground, which is 0. Minus 40 means you're 40 below ground. Plus 40 means that you're 40 above ground. The difference is 80 volts. I don't care that the sum is 0. The difference is 80. We're talking about a completely different situation. You have to add 80 volts of juice in order to get the damn thing working. That's what this means. It's not that the total voltage is 0. And you know that because you're an electrical engineer. Yeah. Spikes Aris, you're an electrical engineer, so you know why this analogy fails, and you're using it anyway. It's shit like this that makes it impossible for me to address creationism respectfully. You have to lie to defend or promote your beliefs. And a belief that you have to lie to promote is a belief that's not worth promoting. To be continued. See ya.